Hi there, a real pleasure to be joined today with alumnus Alan Williamson. Alan graduated from the University of Paisley, which is now UWS Paisley campus, in 1994 with a BSc Honours degree in Computing Science with Digital Control. He's now based in the USA and is Chief Technical Officer and partner of the Portfolio Operations Group for New Harbour Capital. He's also an author, an entrepreneur, lecturer, Java champion who's spoken at conferences all over the world on topics such as open source licensing, big data, cloud techniques, and Internet of Things. Alan, thanks for joining me today.
An absolute honour, you, and thank you very much for asking me.
No, absolutely a pleasure. I thought I might start actually asking about your current role and a little bit about the company you're working with just now and what it is you do with that company.
Sure. So I'm in the private equity space at this precise moment, and it's a world that I didn't even know existed back when I was at university, and frankly, for the first 10 years of my career, I had no idea about it because I was just a hardcore developer. So private equity is just basically a fancy way of saying we buy and sell companies, and buying and selling a company is not dissimilar to buying and selling a house. And my role there is to, when we look to buy a house, is to make sure that the house is indeed fit for purpose. And when we do buy the house, is there any changes or upgrades that we want to do to make sure the house can grow, create more wealth, and create a lot of jobs for people? So that's what I do. I take over the technology side of the fence, and part of my role is helping mentor and educate leaders in that space and help them think broader. I've been a CTO for many portfolios for the last sort of 15 years, etc. But I was as equally as bewildered as anybody else is going into this world. So we're there to play a big brother role in order to ensure their success.
Excellent. And you said it yourself, it's a little bit different from university days. So can I take you back now to the 1980s and ask about some of your aspirations when you were leaving school, and why you chose computing science and why you chose to study it in Paisley?
Well, I have to attribute this one to my father. So I was one of those boys that just took things apart. I know it's a cliche, it is, but we're back in the ZX Spectrum days, Ewan. That's way back in the early 80s here. And I remember badgering my mother and father to save up and buy me this computer. And it was like a month's salary for them at the time. I mean, going through Dumfries High Street, trying to figure out which one to buy. And I said, no, it's got to be the ZX Spectrum, got to be the ZX Spectrum. And I really had no clue what the hell I was talking about. I just, whatever magazine said, that was the one. Anyway, so it was purchased, and I still remember my mother's face when she came in. And basically, I had a big train set, and I'd taken apart my ZX Spectrum, and I'd soldered onto the back of it the ability to do relay. So I had basically wrote a little program to switch my train tracks with the ZX Spectrum. I wasn't that interested in the game side of the fence because I was a hardware guy. I loved that touchy-feely stuff. And my mother's face to this day, and the poor woman's dead, but I still see it, the horror of, what the hell have you done? This is a huge investment and it's here in tatters. And I could not convince her the beauty and the engineering genius of what I'd done. And that was a long time ago, and it took maybe 25 years until I sort of handed mother my first book and I said, "This is why." This is why that ZX Spectrum moment was there. So she finally got it. So that then sort of scratched an itch. And I remember when I was 16 years of age, I was about to start the last year of high school, and it was my father spotted a small advert for Paisley Tech to say they were still recruiting for their incoming year. And it was for this basically computer science with digital control, which was basically a fancy way of saying robotics. And father said, don't go to school tomorrow. I'm taking you to Paisley. So he drove me to Paisley, 16-year-old, pimples all over the shop, had no clue how to do life. We met with Professor Frew, and he took us in, and we had a wonderful chat. And he did say, you are a bit young. I'm a bit concerned about the youngness of it. And father managed to convince him that no, He's ready. And there's me sitting there thinking, Jesus, the adults are talking. What the hell's going on here? Uh, but it was the best decision I ever made. At 16, I left home, went up to Glasgow and Paisley, and it was the best 5 years of my life. It truly was.
That's amazing. Yeah, it just shows you the parents can kind of yeah give you a big influence in life, but actually it was more physical in the case of putting you in the car.
Yes, and my father was not a learned man, so he was not a university man at all. So he was truly pushing me into a world that, because he could tell that I loved this stuff, and it truly was. And honestly, and this may sound horrendously conceited, etc., I never found it hard because I just loved it. I mean, some of the lectures that I had, Professor Farland, Dr. Norris, Professor Bartlett, these guys just inspired me, and their breadth of knowledge and their enthusiasm. It was like I was a sponge. Give me more, give me more. It was phenomenal, and the stuff that they taught me, it's still to this day. I remember Professor Bartlett coming in and saying, "Forget about all of how you can count, because you've got it all wrong. 2 + 2 is not 4. I'm going to teach you how to count properly." And that lecture still stays with me, and that was like 35 years ago.
And was there other challenges then being so young, in terms of the rest of the
Yes,
family?
absolutely. Do not. There is no need to iron your socks. I had major problems just getting life sorted, but fortunately I stayed in the halls of residence out at Thornley Park, which I believe has been completely modernised now. Back in my day, it was the individual little houses, uh, but I got in with a good crew. They taught me how to get drunk for the first time, also, but they took me under their wing and truly gave me a wonderful experience away from home.
That's incredible. Yeah, absolutely. And then, I mean, there's a kind of obviously a whirlwind of those years. Did you do a placement as part of that course?
Yes,
Or
I did. I did. I went to BP Exploration in Glasgow, and again, that opened up my eyes, because what that did was all of our lectures, etc., was all very practical, not practical, but sort of book smart and all, getting algorithms and all that stuff. What BP Exploration showed me was the complete different side of all of this. It was basically the IT side of the fence, something that we weren't taught at all. And I had the wonderful opportunity to be sort of a mentoree under a couple of great guys that took me all over the place, and I learned a lot about how software really gets into the mainstream. And what that really taught me was uh, what management does. We never got taught management at in our degree course. It was always just code, 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 algorithms, algorithms, algorithms. So this whole idea of management, project management, timelines, all of that stuff, I got a lot out of that placement year. It was huge.
mm. And yeah, I mean, we hear that from a lot of graduates as well. They really did, come out more rounded in the sense of having the degree, but having that little bit of knowledge as well in terms of the workplace. It's a powerful combination,
Yeah.
absolutely. And did you kind of feel ready for the next steps that came following graduation, or?
Oh, good God, no. It was a scary beast altogether. I mean, I remember the first job that I got uh, was actually with the Ministry of Defence, and that was a very structured environment. I didn't last too long there because I just didn't like the sort of the military aspect of it, and I felt like a fish out of water. And particularly in those days, you didn't specialize in a given language. Okay, so as a programmer, you were expected whatever it was, the day was C or C++ or Ada, etc. You were all over the place, so you didn't get to really specialize. And then I finally jumped into, which was one of the best jobs in my life, was Harman Kardon, which was basically the embedded software, embedded audio. So they did the professional equipment for the big stadiums, etc. And that was the first time that I truly got to see what the power of software and interacting with the real world did. To have Tina Turner stand in front of you in a sound check on Wembley as it's going through your software on a compressor at the back end, that was so humbling. And I had to sort of pinch myself and say, Jesus, look who I'm standing in front of. As she's blasting out these tunes. She didn't know me from Adam. But the point was that that truly got me into the sort of, yeah, software's cool, but the intersection between software and the real world, now that's truly cool.
And you spoke about some of your classmates as well. Was there a big demand? 'Cause we're talking kind of later 1990s, but was there a real demand for the type of skills that you had at the time, or was it a...
There was 6 of us that graduated from this particular stream, and they all went on to great stuff. I mean, one went on to do the battery management of Nokia. Another one went to do the set-top boxes of Philips. So there was that need for that embedded software stuff, and I was involved in the embedded software of sound processing and all that side of the fence. And interestingly enough, the guy that ran that unit in Harman Kardon, London, he also was part of the core Sinclair research group for the ZX Spectrum. So the war stories that he told about how they bootstrapped this home computer in the mad rush of the early 80s. Oh, I just lapped up lunchtimes listening to his stories from that perspective. So again, it closed the loop wonderfully on that front. But no, the software side of the fence was the whole embedded stuff. And back in those days, we were still encoding to a particular chip's feature set. So if whatever you chose, Motorola or Texas, whatever it was, you had to specialize in that. This was a problem because the chip industry was moving fast, that they were coming out with cheaper and easier chips. But in order to completely switch a whole team over to a completely different computer set and language set was a logistical nightmare. So most of the times you just stuck with what you knew. Then this thing called Oak, that then became Java, started to float around. And what Sun Microsystems was doing, basically, they had come up with this proof of concept, which was this language that would run on top of a virtualized machine in the embedded space. And again, they were going for TV set-top boxes originally. And it was to solve the problem that we were all facing, which is, I just want to write a consistent language, but somebody else figure out how it translates onto the physical machine. So I got talking and I got sort of leaned into that group. And that was another pivotal moment in my career, which was I jumped into the Java space at that point. But I came from a hardware perspective as opposed to a software engineer's perspective into the Java space. And at that point, they were looking for people around the world that was needing to do real world things with it and what have you. And long story short, I got involved with some of the core Java team, and I'm proud to say I was part of the core Java team with respect to the server side of the fence. So that was a huge career change for me as I got more involved with Sun Microsystems, and I got introduced to the wonderful world of America.
Yeah, absolutely. And is it fair to say Java's kind of something of a passion for you because you wrote books on the script?
I owe my career to that little dookie for sure. In fact, just allow me to go off camera for a minute. Yeah, the mascot's always at my desk. The original Sun Microsystems. Yeah, I owe a lot to Java.
Yeah, and you were the first UK Java champion, which kind of recognised people who made a massive contribution. That must have been a bit of an accolade for you as well.
It absolutely was. It was because again at that time it was just a passion. I mean, we were just eating, breathing, and loving this stuff. And Sun was a great company to work for at that time. They truly were as a research and development company, and to the detriment. I mean, they didn't make any great money, which is why they got sold to Oracle, etc. But that's another story. But fundamentally, it was a great time to be in, and there was some wonderful people circulating around that time as well, which was, and they've all gone on to great things as well. So it was a great community to be a part of.
And was that the bridge then? You mentioned the US. Was that the bridge that kind of took you over there in terms of?
It got me interested in that side of the fence, but where the sort of real knock-on effect was that I'd published a number of books done because we were trying to educate the world into this thing called Java and trying to get people to go. And at that time, the web sort of took off, and the web was looking for a standard set of languages, etc., to accelerate its development. So Java hit at the right time in the evolution. So we were there as sort of advocates and trainers to get this world bootstrapped up. And what happened was I was going back and forth to the US every so often, and then I got an email out of the blue from what has now become my long-term mentor of over 25 years, Jim Milbury, and he was from a private equity company, and he said, we've bought this company, they've got this thing called Java, we've no clue what the hell it is, can you come and look at it? And I said, okay. And I thought it was like a spam email or something like that, because you get something from it. We'll fly for your tickets, we'll get you out and sort of stuff. I said, but why me? And he said, oh, your name came up first in the Amazon book list. So thank you, Mother, for naming me Alan, A-L. That was that got me to the top of the list. So yeah, that's exactly how it worked. I went out and I got introduced to the world of private equity and got completely and utterly hooked and thoroughly enjoyed what was a completely unknown world to me. Didn't know it existed, didn't know what it was. And it's funny, I was saying this to somebody else the other day. What I love about my job and my role here in the PE space, I kind of liken it to being a movie star. Okay, a movie star works on a movie for maybe 1 to 2 years. They have their community of people, and they focus purely on that movie, and then the movie finishes. They do a little bit of promotion, and then they move on to the next movie. That's private equity. That's what we do. We buy a company. We focus in on the company. We create a team with the company. We then build it. Then we do a little bit of marketing as we sell the company, and then we move on to the next one. So you've got an inherent renewal process, a Doctor Who regeneration, if you will, built in to your role, and it never gets dull.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I mean, obviously, the challenges are similar, but must be a freshness each time you get into a new project now, and you feel that you can add things to it, but it's not the same as the last project.
No, and but what's interesting is you get involved in many different areas, many different industry sectors, and you get to truly see things that you think, wow, somebody's made a business out of that. Somebody's made a multi-million-dollar business out of that. But there's stuff that you would just never assume. But of course, there's always a story to every single item that we interact with or every single service that we utilize. And that truly opened up my eyes, and I absolutely loved the diversity of everything. And in many respects, over the years of doing it, I got mentored and I got sort of trained up in how to do all this sort of stuff. So then it became the student became the professor type, sort of handing over the mantra. And again, when I'm looking at people, helping them, training them, figuring out this new world, I soon discovered that there was an awful lot of common problems that everybody was facing. And one of the sort of things that I got lost in was being a CTO for the first time. I mean, frankly, of all the C levels, that's probably the one that's the least defined. CTO was never mentioned at Paisley. We were taught to be developers. We were taught to be software engineers, maybe a manager, but nobody had ever sort of mapped out what was the true career path. What was ahead of you? The notion of being a chief technology officer, that was a term that was just simply never bandied about. So talk about thinking you could get to a ceiling in your career, and then suddenly you get to that and you're thinking, no, there's a whole world that's still above you. Let me explain some of these new terms. That was eye-opening for me as well. But a CTO, again, is very poorly defined. You go into any bookstore, many books on CEO, many books on CFO. Find a book on CTO, you will know, it's mine. But there was nothing there. So I set about basically gathering up all of my war stories and success stories and collecting it all from other mentors as well in the private equity space. It's just not my voice in the book. To basically give this a sort of like a bootstrap. Here's how you think like a CTO. Here's what you need to do as a CTO. And if my only criticism of Paisley, and it's not a big criticism, you is, and maybe it's changed today, but I don't think we were ever shown what was truly possible in the role that we were going into.
That's
We didn't
interesting.
get the full long term, here's where you could go.
Yeah.
It was very much a, and maybe that's the basis at the time of the university was be good at what you do, the rest will come by itself.
And is that something, because I know you've kind of dabbled with a bit of lecturing at Virginia Commonwealth University. Is that something you bring into some of the things that you would want to teach?
Yes, and I've loved that part of it, and I always jump at it. I took a few courses over a number of semesters, like design courses and algorithmic courses, and one of the things that I did there was to show in real world how you're using this stuff. It's not just everybody has the yeah, we were taught Pythagoras at school, but when have I ever used Pythagoras? I was making sure that people truly seen what it was that they were going to be using this for, and how most of the time, what the terminology that we use in an academic setting isn't the same terminology we use in a commercial setting, but it's the same thing. And your strength as a developer or as an engineer is figuring out that gap and utilizing some of the basics that were taught in order to accelerate your own career growth. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. There's no doubt about it. And yes, I did probably wander off and tell them the odd story, etc., about where things went, but it was enjoyable. We had a good time.
No, it's excellent. And it's obviously something you're passionate about doing as well, and giving back, educating, mentoring, advising, those types of things. And I know you're involved with a couple of universities as well in terms of boards and things like that, industry advisory roles and things. And yeah, and I guess you were back at university a few years back. How do you think the university's changed in that period of time? And what's your hopes for the future in terms of education, whether it's here or other universities?
I think it's been interesting. I have had the opportunity to look at universities in a number of continents, all over the world, etc. And I still believe, and maybe it's where the home is where the heart is. I think the UK is doing it best at the moment, uh, because, and I was encouraged when I spoke to some of the students at Paisley when I went back, etc. It was nice to see some of the buildings hadn't changed, so well done there. Uh, the No matter how sort of fancy and sexy computing becomes, it's still fundamentally ones and zeros on a chip doing the same stuff as it was 30, 40 years ago. And it was encouraging to see that the basics were still being taught. What I've discovered with certain academic institutions is they skip all of that and go straight to effectively, we're going to prepare you for the job market. It's like we're going to teach you how to pass the exams as opposed to teach you what the content is. And then the exams become somewhat of an academic exercise. It should be trivial to you if you know what you're doing. And what I've definitely discovered is that there is a pocket of students, particularly when you hire graduates, etc., that just don't know the basics. And you think, oh my God, you're doing yourself a disservice. Whereas I was really encouraged with the people I spoke to there that some of the basics were still being taught, and they are still crucial. I mean, something as simple as understanding how memory works underneath the covers. Yes, memory is huge, it's cheap, it's inexpensive, you don't have to worry about it to these days, but frankly, you still do, because even if you're doing AI, an LLM model still requires a phenomenal amount of space, and you don't have a limitless number of gig in a particular machine. So we're playing the same game, it's just different numbers. And losing sense of the basics, I think it's harder and harder, and it's something that I get it from the university's perspective that they're trying to produce graduates that can hit the ground running, go into industry and make a difference? And does your average node developer, Java developer, really care about underlying algorithms, etc.? No, they just call a function. As far as they're concerned, it does what it does. But somebody somewhere has to tool up. Somebody somewhere has to create the tools for everybody else to work on. My career has always been the guy that built the tools for others to go and build something cool with. So in the California gold rush, I'd be the guy that's building the shovels, not panning the gold. That was always where I came from, and that's where I think, and I'd attribute this to the Dr. Norris and Professor McFarland. They truly were in the sort of understand your tools. If you understand your tools, you can build anything.
So that sounds like a good piece of advice for our graduates. Is there any advice you've been given that you've continued to live by or would pass on?
Fail fast. Don't be scared to hold your hand up and say, I have no clue what you're talking about. Okay. And I would say that my early part of my career was I was just too scared to hold my hand up and say, I have no clue what you're talking about. And I guess what's been interesting is in my career in the PE space, every company has their own lexicon for the same stuff. And you can get very intimidated if you go into a company and they're all starting to use all these fancy buzzwords. And you're thinking, I no clue what you're talking about. Don't be scared to stand up and say, I have no clue what you're talking about. Okay. 9 times out of 10, it's probably tomato versus tomato. It isn't as far away as what it may seem, but don't be scared to make yourself look stupid.
No, that's good advice. I do that most days, if I'm going to be honest.
It can be intimidating. I mean, it's hard. I mean, it's hard to do that. And the amount of times that somebody else has done it and you go, oh, thank God you asked that question because I had no idea what they were talking about. Just do it. You're never going to be fired because you asked a question.
And the book, you obviously mentioned the book, Think Like a CTO, and basically born out of no one else was doing it, and you felt there was a gap there in terms of a knowledge gap for people, and also a gap in terms of educating people. Is there what's the kind of response been to that? It looks as if it's
been very positive. It's been good. I was Amazon bestseller in my category, so I was quite pleased with that. The biggest part of the book focuses on transitioning from being a technical person to being a business person. Okay, so the role of a CTO is to basically take on the technology decisions of the company and ensure that the company is set up for success and growth. We never want to be the reason why we can't sell more or we can't deliver more. Technology should never be in the way. It should always be in front. And a lot of my sort of experience in mentoring and helping others has been bridging that gap from stop talking in buzzwords, talk in a language that the business can understand. Bridge from all of your sort of algorithmic woes and the fact that Amazon isn't doing this or Azure isn't doing that or the computer's falling over. They don't care. Tell it in a language that they can understand and be part of the conversation. Don't be elitist. Don't be sort of standoffish and say, he just talks babblygook, I have no clue how to talk to him, etc. The great CTOs that I look up to, the ones that I admire, are the ones that can have a conversation with anybody, but still get their input to help them solve their problems. And that's where most of the book is dedicated towards, plus some housekeeping stuff you should remember and what you should be doing. But fundamentally, how do I talk to a CFO? How do I talk to a CEO? And how do I talk to investors? How do I present at a board meeting where frankly they don't give a crap about the language or the algorithms or the environment or the platform? They just want to know, is it fast? Is it stable? And does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. And is there a plan to do a developmental piece from that or something else? Are you quite happy leaving
I
that?
will probably update the book in a few years. I'm already collecting additional chapters because every portfolio company you go into, you learn something new, which is what keeps this job exciting. So I will update it at a later date for that one. And yeah, more to come.
Is there more of a challenge? I wonder because of the industry, the technology industry, is there more of a challenge that things change so quickly, or is that
There
fair?
is. I mean, so there's at the end of the day, we we reinvent ourselves every 5 years, and we literally reinvent everything in the last 5 years. So in order for you to be successful, you have to keep in this education loop. I mean, 5 years ago, AI wasn't mainstream, for example, but now it is. Everybody's got to have an AI solution. Before that, it was big data. I mean, we go through our phases and our waves, etc. As hardware gets cheaper, as bandwidth gets faster, more and more opportunities open up. We always think that all the problems have been solved until somebody comes up with something horrendously innovative, and you think, God, that just sounds so simple. Why couldn't I have come up with that? But yet it was. And I think in today's challenges, what we've got now as far as the new CTO that's coming into this role is you've got a very much a cloud-based environment whereby you're no longer buying your own hardware and your own kit, etc. So that comes with its own set of challenges with respect to security, scalability, all that stuff. But more importantly, you now have a workforce that are demanding to stay at home. The office environment as we know it, where everybody comes to the office for 8 hours of the day and then goes home, those days are gone, particularly in the tech space. What it's been replaced with is more of a hybrid solution, and even then, it's spotty, whereby getting people into an office and round a whiteboard to be able to hash out some ideas and thoughts or problems are becoming rare and few and far between. I personally think that's criminal. The human touch is still the key thing. Uh, yes, I work from home clearly. However, most of my time is spent with the portfolio. Most of my time is spent traveling. I mean, I did over 90 flights last year alone. Uh, so I love being face to face with people. There's nothing beats it. And I think my advice to sort of the next generation is crave for that. Don't keep hiding away in your own house. Uh, get that human contact.
Absolutely. Well, listen, thanks a lot for your time. I really appreciate that, and hopefully we can get a face to face some point.
Indeed, very soon, maybe in April, as New York is coming up.
Yeah, we're going to go on the Tartan Day in New York, so yeah, we'd love to see you there. If not, back in Scotland, wherever it be.
Indeed,
So for now, Alan, thank you very much for your time.
an absolute pleasure, Ewan. Thank you very much.